Hello, Dean.
Hello, Carrie. Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
You too.
Welcome to another edition of the Inner Nine series.
Yes.
Today, we're going to explore a little bit about decisions and decision making, something that each leader can relate to.
Yes.
So, speaking of that, if you are listening in and you are a leader, there's a good chance you probably made a couple of dozen decisions before lunch today. Some of them big, some of them small, some things maybe you barely even thought about, but yet only a few of those is going to actually shape your future and the career that you are aspiring to.
Yes.
So, Carrie, you and I talk about this a lot that leaders' calendars are often full, if not overflowing, but sometimes their judgment can feel a little thin. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think most leaders aren't struggling because they're lazy or uninformed. They're drowning in urgency. Some's real and some of it's manufactured. And I think that they have lost clarity in what truly deserves their energy and their time. And that's what this episode is about. It's about not just the definition of what does it mean to make a decision, but it's about reclaiming your judgment, not just redefining your to-do list.
Oh, that's interesting. So, we're going to talk about decision making as more of an architecture, the way we frame, filter, and learn from choices
Mhm.
instead of just kind of this one-time event, right?
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right, so let's jump in then. All
Okay.
right, so can we start with the trap that most everyone can relate to, that everything seems urgent? Board requests, the team escalations, customer issues. When you're sitting in that leadership seat, it all looks and feels like it's high stakes.
Yeah.
So, how does that actually erode judgment?
So when every decision feels equally as urgent, like in the scenario you described, none of them get the actual depth that they deserve. So you end up spending cognitive energy on the trivial and then making the consequential calls while mentally exhausted, the ones that you really need to have your energy stored for. And that's not just tiring for you and frankly for the people around you, because if you don't make a great decision, you're going to change your mind, make a different decision, create whiplash. It also degrades your ability to have proper judgment over time.
Yeah. So, what does that kind of look like when a leader's caught in that kind of pattern?
That's such a great question. So I would describe it as that they're hyper responsive. Their team may praise their availability, but strategically they're just reactive. And so they're responding to whatever's loudest, whatever noise is out there, and they're trying to quiet that, not necessarily what moves the needle. And so the biggest decisions get made in the margins, in the hallways, in the 5 minute windows between meetings. Hallway, if you're working virtually, metaphorically, from your office to your kitchen for a glass of water.
Mhm.
And those are the ones that end up defining their legacy.
So the shift is what? Kind of realizing that not every choice actually deserves the same mental bandwidth and mental energy?
Yeah, I think deciding well starts with that honest moment with yourself. When you say, what actually deserves my judgment and what just needs a good enough answer so that I can protect my best thinking for what matters most. And a lot of us fear the good enough answer, which is an ego based way to still make decisions, right? And what we want out of our decisions, they don't always have to be 100% right in the outcome, but we need to know that we made them fully with what you and I talk about often, eyes wide open, heart full, right? Facts and data,
Mhm.
morally and virtually, meaning like virtue wise, values wise, directionally correct. If it ends up being the wrong decision, that's okay. You still made it with the best judgment process that you can. And that's one of the frameworks that we use. But I think that's part of what you want to do is to protect your ability to make the best decisions for what matters the most.
And there's another trap here kind of hidden in the background, right? It's that trap of either consulting with everyone
Yeah.
or consulting with no one. Both feel logical, usually to the leader in the moment, but why do smart leaders land in those extremes?
So happens all the time. So a leader who decides alone, they're often protecting themselves from vulnerability, right? Because it feels like it could be clean, there's no messy input, there's no conflict, but it's built on a lie that their perspective is enough. And let's not confuse this with do you believe in yourself and do you feel confident in the outcome that you're making? It's back to gathering facts and data. And so you can still believe that your decision and your outcome would be the one that ends up being the right one or the one that you go with, so to speak. But it feels uncomfortable to invite people into that process. On the other side, the leader who asks everyone for their input isn't always being inclusive, right? It's sometimes like they're avoiding the weight of making the call. They're bringing all these opinions in so that they can share if it bombs. Then we all did this. Hey, we all decided this together, right? And neither of those are making the decision out of a place of actually leveraging facts and information and discernment and that judgment piece. They're more seeing it from, if this succeeds or if this fails, where does the credit go or where does the accountability fall?
And both kind of have a cost to trust, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Decide alone and you bypass the people closest to the reality and they stop then offering wisdom because it clearly doesn't matter what they say, right? Over over consult, over ask people what their opinions are, over collaborate, then people learn that involvement doesn't equal influence. The more meetings they attend, the less impact they feel because they also end up being the ones that people point the finger to. We all decided, didn't we? And then it didn't
Mm.
work. Did it not? And so then they start to feel lost in the process and then you lose your best thinkers. They don't want to contribute as much anymore. The other thing about perception, and this is real, we're dealing with this with one client, is if you were taking the more collaborative route, some leaders are naturally really collaborative, but there's a very fine line between gaining buy-in or communicating, being an information broker of communicating things that are happening so you can get various perspectives as opposed to leaning and layering in too many decisions, stalling processes, stalling your own ability to own the decision or the outcome. And the perception in a 360 degrees can make people think that your team is running you instead of your team running it. Likewise, if you make the decisions in a vacuum, your decisions may be seen from 360 degrees as ineffective or inappropriate, misaligned, or not even near target. And you wouldn't know that until the outcome of that decision is seen. And that's the scary part.
Wow. So if someone listening currently to us is thinking, you know what, I might be on one of those extremes,
Yeah.
what's one clarifying question they can ask themselves this week to kind of gain some insight?
I think the best way to look back and be introspective about this is to look at your last major decision and ask who had information that could have changed this decision. And did I ask them? Who will live out the consequences? And did I involve them? If the answer is no or both, then you're under consulting. If your invite list is everyone who may have an opinion, then you're probably over consulting, right? So you want to take a quick inventory of what those decisions are. I've seen this pendulum swing. I've even been given feedback where I will say, well, why didn't you tell me? And people's
Mm,
response will be, well, you didn't ask, first of all. Second of all, the response is sometimes, well, we would have told you, but you wouldn't have listened to us anyway. Right. So even I'm guilty of making my own decisions in a silo. But then when I realized that my pendulum swung too far to the other direction, I felt paralyzed from fear. I was afraid I would make the wrong decision and I stopped trusting myself. And so then
mm.
I would start to ask people, and I wouldn't do or move forward unless I felt like I had enough people that voted yes. Right. Like there was that shared, like, okay, but that's me letting them decide for me. And eventually you grow into just knowing that I feel like I know based on my experience and the perspective that I have. I feel like I know the right answer. I just want to cross check it. And if there's anything wowing that comes up from that cross checking process, I may make a different decision and I'm going to allow myself to stay open to that because I want to make decisions eyes wide open, heart full. And I think that's the sweet spot that you want to eventually get to. And that takes some time and it takes some maturity, the ability to, look at yourself in a real, true, authentic way with some grace and some honesty.
And for those listening, we are going to get to some tactical things that we can address and actually recommend that you use. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, there's a third trap that I kind of want to make sure that we identify here. And it's a bit uncomfortable and it's what you call outcome amnesia. So you say there's a lot of leaders that are getting older, but not necessarily wiser. What do you mean by that?
And older, I don't necessarily mean age,
Mm,
right? I
right.
mean the progression in their career, the level that they've achieved. They're maturing through certain categories of leadership, whether that is increased span or scope of employees or part of the P&L or title, right? Either way, leaders
Hmm.
make decisions, they communicate them, they move on. It's the whole out of outbox, out of mind mentality. They don't
Okay.
circle back with rigor to ask, well, did this work? Was our decision right or not, and why? What surprised us most in the outcome? This experience it accumulates and then it doesn't get metabolized into wisdom, into lessons that they could learn from it. And so they keep repeating the same mistakes and the same patterns in new contexts. And whether those mistakes or patterns are outcomes that fail or decision making theories that they believe are absolutely true and right, but they can't see outside of themselves or they get in their own way.
Okay, so then it kind of feels like momentum because we're moving
Right.
things forward, right? We're moving on to the next thing, but there's no taking time out to recognize those patterns that may be happening.
Yeah, and if you think about it, wisdom requires friction. So you have to pause and look backwards before you rush forward again. And that's where the learning lives. It's in the small adjustments that you would make next time if you truly examine what happened this time. It's not the self-shame, self-blame, self-judgment game. It's just about
Hmm.
what can I do? Could I have made it faster? Could I have made it with a different person? Could I have communicated differently? Could I have not been triggered by the it could be a lot of different things, but if you really want truth in what your decision-making process is and should be, that look back, that arrears perspective that you can get from allowing yourself to do that is really, really powerful.
And hopefully, building that reflection muscle doesn't necessarily mean we have to add another meeting to our calendar.
No, and it doesn't
No.
mean you need to lay up at night ruminating, losing sleep over things that you should have done differently, right? It could be as simple as a quarterly decision review where you give yourself a 1 hour block and you and maybe your team look at a handful of big decisions and ask, what did this teach us? That one practice changes the trajectory of your judgment over time.
All right. So, as promised a few moments ago, let's put some of this structure into this process without creating a whole lot of additional bureaucracy. So, you use something with your clients called RICE,
Mhm.
RICE,
Yep.
almost like movements in a piece of music. So, can you walk us through as if this was a working session with you?
Yeah. So, what I would tell somebody is that rice is a rhythm for consequential decisions. Recognize what you're really facing. That's the first one. That's R. So, before you decide anything, classify the decision. Is it reversible or is it a one-way door? Is it low impact or high impact? If it's reversible, low impact decisions can come faster than others. If it's high impact, then hard to reverse decisions, they deserve a little bit more rigor. Most leaders skip this and they treat everything the same. They treat everything as on fire or not, or they're moving too fast to even realize that that's subconsciously how they're making decisions. They're just going.
Okay.
I would be identifying what right looks like. So every circular debate in a room, we've seen this a lot. It's a fight about criteria that nobody's named yet. So once you define what matters, the impact on the stakeholders, the strategic fit, the risk, the feasibility, this goes back to eyes wide open, that part, conversations become comparisons instead of arguments, right? Criteria feels like constraints at first, but they're actually permission. Here's what we're optimizing for. That's a big difference there. Then you see, right? This is RIC would be collecting the wisdom you need, not necessarily every opinion. So ask whose perspective would change this decision and who will be significantly affected with this decision's outcomes. Input is a data, it's not a vote. You are not outsourcing the decision. You still get to make the decision. You are the one in charge, accountable, responsible, whatever it may be. But just know that when you do this, you're not giving it away. You're enriching it. And so that's how you avoid both isolation and the analysis paralysis. That's the other thing about this is not making a decision, in fact, is a decision. And so then E, so we have RICE, E is execute and examine. With this, you want to decide, communicate clearly, then schedule a review. Put a date on the calendar before you execute where you will ask everybody and say, did this do what we thought it would do? What surprised us most? And that's how you turn one decision into a compounded asset instead of a one off event. That's the way I would say RICE works.
Terrific. And if someone forgets the RICE acronym, maybe a short version is simply classify, define, consult, then commit and review.
That's the process: classify, define, consult, commit, and review.
All right. So let's apply this potentially in the real world for a second.
Okay.
So let's pretend I'm a CEO picking a new core system, maybe
Are we going to
something like
role play? I love role plays.
all right, you ready? So
Yeah.
this is going to be something like a CRM, maybe an HR type of platform.
Okay.
Walk us through how RICE would actually sound in the room.
Okay. Teacher. Okay. I had platform. Okay. So, first part R, recognize. This is a high impact decision and it would be hard to undo. If I go to one platform versus the other, that's a pretty big deal, right? That tells us that we're not going to make this choice in a 30-minute meeting and we're going to give it real time it deserves. Then I'm going to identify the criteria. I want to think about how are we going to integrate? So we want to care about that part of the process, right? How is that going to work with existing systems? What is the user experience from a new employee perspective if we're going with the HRIS type of platform as
Hmm.
this example? How does it feel for new employees versus employees that exist? What do they go through every single day? And are we going to select and make the right decision based on that experience so that adoption isn't a battle? You want to make sure that you don't have any limiting barriers there. And then what's the total cost of ownership, including the training and support? And I don't just mean from a budget perspective. I mean, thinking about security and scalability over time. Is this a platform that as we grow, it can grow with us? Right. Or as
Hmm.
we roll out different modules in it, maybe we start with time and attendance, and then we're going to move to performance management and then community based diversity initiatives, whatever it may be. You want to make sure that you can scale to your company's long term strategic plan over time. That becomes the lens. If an option looks really shiny, but misses one or two of the criteria, then it's an easier no.
Okay, so then the C,
Yeah.
who are we actually talking to?
So that's where we want to start this collection part. So we pull in IT, right? We need to know
Hmm.
what IT is going to go through, what their workload is, if our timing matches their timing, and so forth. We want to be able to think about the people and the users, the power users who are going to be in the system every day. What is the financial cost, the ROI? So we'll want to bring in a CFO, possibly maybe legal, maybe our security team to make sure that we're not worried about cyber attacks and the way that the backends connect to our other systems. Not everybody with an opinion about, oh, I worked with this at this one company before and I really liked it, or my brother Joe sells that platform and you need to go with his. It's not an opinion. Those people's perspectives are interesting, but you want the people's perspective that will change your understanding of the risk or the feasibility. That's what you're going for. Those are the ones that you bring in.
And the last step
Yeah.
is where a lot of teams kind of stop halfway. Is that right?
Yeah, they will execute, but they don't examine. That's why we say execute and examine in the E part. So in a rice world, we'd run a pilot, we would go live, we would have a ready 60 to 90-day review that was scheduled on people's calendars. And in that review, we would be saying, is this system doing what we expected it to do? And if not, then where are we off and what needs need to be adjusted? And that decision making framework, it doesn't slow you down. That's what many people think. Like, we just want to go, bowl in a china shop, move fast, braid things. I've heard all these before.
Hmm.
But what you do when you use the RICE method is it prevents the cascading mistakes that slow you down longer in the long run.
Okay. So you talk about this thing called the decision inventory. So let's
Yes.
get practical for someone who may be listening on their commute and tuning into us for this session. What's the fastest way to start that decision inventory?
Great question. Okay. So grab a notebook, or if you're more of a digital phone person, grab the note app on your phone. Write down 5 to 10 meaningful decisions that you've made in the last 6 months. Then for each one, I want you to jot down 3 things. Did you move too fast, too slow, or about right? Did you involve too many people, too few people, or the right mix of people? Did the outcome work, not work, or land somewhere in that messy middle? And remember, you're not grading yourself on this. And we're not, again, we always say when we do these self reflection exercises in every module of the Inner Nine, this is not the self blame game and shame, self blame, shame, and judge game. You are
Okay.
just trying to gather information and have an honest reflection with yourself with some grace.
So you're actually looking for patterns.
Yes. Yes. You want
So
to find the
once you
trend.
see, yeah. So once you see a pattern, kind of what do you do?
Then you just pick one adjustment. If you move too fast on high impact calls, then pause and run a rice just on one upcoming decision. If you over consult, right, then you want to define next time who truly needs to be in the room. Get better at that practice. The goal is not perfection or a personality transplant. It's an evolution of different behaviors that you're conditioning yourself to be able to do as almost as a reflex over time. At first, you have to practice that. You have to be intentional about it. And then it becomes very natural and normal.
Okay. So this example we've been talking about, this new HRIS system, that's a pretty big decision
Yeah.
that someone's going to need to make, right? Like you said, it's hard to kind of walk that back once you've made the decision and begin to move forward. So for those listening that are looking at an upcoming next big choice or big decision, right? What would be the first thing they should start out with to address that next big item?
Name it, right? So you want to name before you're in the heat of the moment. You want to sit down with the rice model and you want to classify the decision. You want to write the criteria and list whose wisdom you need. And then set 2 dates, the decision date and the review date. And that one deliberate decision can reset how you approach all of the others that you're dealing with, but start with naming it first.
So get specific and then hold yourself accountable to the decision date and the review date.
Yes.
Okay. So as we wrap up here, For the leader who's tired, for the leader who's overwhelmed, and maybe a little nervous about what their inventory decision can reveal, what do you want them to walk away with?
I think the comfort of knowing that allowing decisions to be made in a framework perspective is something that will empower you. And even though it may take a little bit of time at first, it won't hold you back. I remember being a CHRO and I would have a lot of requests coming my way, and I had to be able to quantify the ROI to all of them. And I built a matrix following these models, but my weighted matrix was about impact to the organization. And the impact was defined as that one office, one region, global, right? There's a big difference in that. Budget
Uh-huh.
thresholds is it 10,000, 50,000, 500,000. Stakeholder requirement, am I pulling in three other teams, executives, or can I do this just with my team alone? Execution barriers, which was really if I'm going to deploy this decision or this program, am I going to have people that can actually use it in the time that I need them to use it for? And when you use RICE and then a decision making framework like that, I think that there is a certain clarity that you not only allow yourself to be able to leverage, but you're able to communicate to other people on your team. Hey, you take leadership and ownership of the decisions at a certain level up to this point. I will take the rest. You've now
Hmm.
delegated some decision making authority with the same framework you want decisions to be made in. You're teaching other people how to make solid decisions and you're freeing yourself up in time, right? And then if you have a CEO or a boss that is, you feel like you can't ever get on their calendar, you're not really sure who's making the decisions where, create this framework, give it to them and say, hey, I want to make decisions under X threshold, right? So then you're sort of getting buy-in that you get to make autonomous decisions and be empowered and supported to do those things under a certain level of risk or impact or whatever it may be. And so, in some, your legacy isn't going to be measured by how many decisions you made or how busy you were. A lot of people wear that as a badge of pride. I
Uh-huh.
was so busy, and so nobody cares. Nobody's going to remember that. It's going to be your legacy is going to be measured by the handful of choices that you made, and the ones that you treated as being truly sacred choices, the one that you made with clarity, the one that you made with courage, the one that you made with humility, and the ability to learn from them. That's a big part of it. Deciding well is not about perfection. It's about aligning your choices with what truly matters and then having the courage to examine them so you and your team can grow. And final thing I would say is as you and I talk about even when we make our own decisions, are your eyes wide open and was your heart full? Are you doing it with all the facts and data and are you doing it with the best intentions in mind for everybody? Then chances are you're going to make a pretty good decision.
Terrific. So, for those that are tuning in, if this resonated with you, it's time to kind of create a little bit of that muscle memory. As they say, practice makes perfect, right? So, our suggestion is the following: build that quick decision inventory, pick one upcoming decision, and run it through RICE. And then tell your team that you're experimenting and deciding differently. And that conversation alone can change how your organization thinks.
Yeah. And remember, you're not just making decisions, you are building your judgment. Do it with intention.
Eyes wide open, heart full.
That's right.
Terrific. Carrie, thanks. Terrific conversation as usual. Look forward to seeing you on the next item in our Inner Nine series.
I'm excited. Looking forward to it.